What you see on screen right now is a chart of all the best seals and staffs at different levels. I'm going to be referencing this throughout the entire video, so I thought to just show this at the beginning. But for today though, we are going to be ranking all of the 6 new catalysts that are in the DLC from worst to best. There are 3 seals, 2 staffs, and 1 weapon catalyst that is going to cast sorceries. Now ranking them isn't going to mean much. Just focus more on what I'm saying about these, because they all do have uses, but some will just be more niche than others. Starting off at the bottom, we have the CARIAN Sorcery Sword. This is your lone weapon catalyst in this game. It is a thrusting sword, of which does get the regular light attack combos, does get 110 crit, C-scaling and intelligence, split magic damage, but the heavy attacks do actually allow you to cast sorceries. Now to upgrade this weapon, it does require smithing stones, and you can't infuse it. So 1, you're going to be stuck with impaling thrust, and 2, you can't make it a magic infusion, so therefore you can't really improve the spell damage, which it definitely does lack, because this thing only gets a C scaling and intelligence. Most other staffs in the game get S scalings. Now typically weapon catalysts across the other games, they're never going to be the most optimal option. There are going to be better weapons out there, and there are going to be better catalysts out there. But the purpose of the weapon is going to be 1, the fun factor, the convenience, and sometimes you can have those instances of which you do get some cool combos. Those are primarily going to be for PvP though. But the reason why this one sucks so much is because the spell damage is just horrendous. It just gets way worse spell damage compared to every other staff at every single level. I compared it to the Meteorite staff, which is just like a very average staff to use throughout the entire game. It is very good early on because it already comes maxed out, but later on it does fall off pretty hard. And comparing the damage against Millennia with CARIAN Slicer, it was just getting way less damage at every single level of intelligence. And when you get to those higher levels and use some of the better staffs, like the CARIAN Regal Scepter or the Lusat staff, this thing is going to be doing like almost 3 times as much damage, which is fine that the best staffs are just going to be the best for actually casting spells. But this thing should be like at least somewhat closer to it. It should definitely be better than most staffs, because 1, you get it in the DLC, which is like obviously very late in the game, and 2, it doesn't actually have a secondary effect to boost certain types of spells. So it still would be very balanced if it just did more damage than most of the other staffs, but just not as much as the highest and the best staffs. So yeah, hopefully they improve the intelligence scaling to an S, because as it stands right now, it is not that viable. Number 5, the SPIRALTREE seal. This is a faith-based seal that is just not going to be good to use as a primary option, and other types of seals are just going to outdamage it at every single level. Like even the finger seal just outdamages it from start to finish in terms of your faith scaling. Now the benefit of this seal is going to be the fact that it can boost spiral incantations, and it does boost them by 20%. Now it is just going to be for the 3 that you see on screen right now. No, it does not boost the things like Discus of Light. But getting a 20% boost to things like Golden Arcs or Giant Golden Arc is very solid. So to maximize the damage of these things, you will just have like the best seal equipped, which is obviously going to be dependent on what level that you're at. And then you just have this seal in your offhand, and you just gain a 20% boost. As long as you just have it equipped, you don't even need to use it at all, and you will still gain that 20%. Now, if you just wanted to use these spells in particular, because you had like a certain themed build, then using this seal is going to be the best one up until you get to about 50 to 60 faith. And then even at that point, if you're just going to be using 1 seal, just using things like the Godslayer seal or the Erdtree seal are just going to be way better, even accounting for that 20% boost. But yeah, that's going to be its only use, the fact that you can just boost a couple of decent spells by 20%. Number 4, the Fire Knights seal. This is another faith-based seal, and very much like the SPIRALTREE, it is just not going to be good as a primary option. In fact, it can actually be even worse, especially at lower levels. It just performs worse than like almost every other type of seal in the game. But when you do get to about 60 faith, you start to notice that it will improve a lot more. And in fact, at 70 faith, it actually does outdamage things like the Godslayer seal, but it's still not going to be doing as much as the Erdtree seal. So there's never really a point of which this is going to be the best seal to use. However, this actually does boost the damage of Messmer's flame incantations by 15%, which is actually very good because that includes things like Fire Serpent and Messmer's Orb. And this seal can also stack with some armor set pieces that can just further improve the damage of these spells. Now, if you just wanted to use these spells primarily, and you just wanted to use 1 seal, because you didn't want the hassle of having to put one in your offhand just to gain the boosted damage, and you probably wanted to have a hand free to use a weapon, this one is going to be the best one to use at about 60 faith. Now, just if you're going to be using the Messmer's Flame spells, and also this is going to be true if you wanted to actually just maximize the damage completely and have 2 different Fire Knight seals if you managed to get a second one. But if you did want to use a wide variety of spells, I would never use that as a primary option. Number 3, the Maternal Staff. Now, yes, I know this is going to be one of the best options to use alongside the Impenetrable Thorns spell, and that's probably the most broken spell in the game right now. And I think because of that, it is the only reason why this staff gets this high, because outside of it, it is going to be very niche uses. Now, starting off with the fact that it is an Intelligence and Arcane-based staff, very comparable to the Albinauric staff. Albinauric gets an S scaling in Arcane and a B scaling in Intelligence, where this one actually gets a double A scaling. Now, typically, I wouldn't really care for a staff like this, because there's no split Intelligence Arcane weapons in this game, unless you use certain types of Intelligence or Arcane weapons that can be infused. Even then, it's still going to be very niche. I'd rather just go into one stat and just boost the damage that way. So I think the Albinauric staff is just going to be better. And honestly, the Albinauric staff just does more damage at like most levels. Even at split, even Intelligence and Arcane, of which where you'd think the Maternal staff would get more damage, the Albinauric staff still out damages it. At 20/20, 40/40, even 60/60, the Albinauric staff is just out damaging it. And this is not even optimized for the Albinauric staff. Like the Maternal staff damage is that bad that at 60 Intelligence Arcane, it's getting just as much sorcery scaling as the Lusat's Glintstone staff. And that one doesn't have an Arcane scaling. And I've put 60 points into Arcane. But once you do get to about 70 Intelligence and Arcane, that's when you start to notice that the Maternal staff is going to be out damaging the Albinauric staff. Because as you see at 80/80, it is going to get 413 Incan scaling, which is actually very good and comparable to the Prince of the Death staff. At 80 Intelligence and Faith, the Prince of the Death staff does get 430 sorcery scaling. So at max levels, this one is still going to be the best option. Now, this does also boost the damage of finger-based sorceries by 15%, but the reason why it is going to be popular right now is because it does pair very nicely alongside the Impenetrable Thorns spell. Reason being is that this one does actually have passive bleed, and obviously blood loss build up scales with the arcane stat, so pairing it alongside a staff that has an arcane scaling, it is going to further enhance the blood loss build up. And this is also going to be true for things like Briars of Sin and Briars of Punishment, but Impenetrable Thorns is like broken and does amazing damage, so it's going to be the much better option, which is kind of weird because you have to spec into Intelligence and Arcane to boost the damage and blood loss build up, but you have to go spec into Faith just to meet the requirements for the spell. That's kind of annoying. Now, you'd think that the Albinauric staff just gets better blood loss build up because it gets an S scaling in Arcane, but no, the Maternal staff literally gets better bleed when using the bleed based spells. I was testing it out with Briars of Sin, and at about 20 Arcane, they both did about 100 blood loss build up. At 40, the Maternal did 180 compared to the Albinauric's only 120. And then at 60 and 80 Arcane, both numbers are like very similar. It doesn't feel like it goes much further beyond 60 Arcane in terms of the blood loss buildup. And yes, I did try it out with the Impenetrable Thorns as well. It was like a lot harder to test because Impenetrable Thorns does like so much bleed. It's hard to find an enemy that has that much bleed resist. But it was working the same way in that the Maternal staff was just getting much more blood loss buildup than the Albinauric staff. Now, as I did mention, the Albinauric staff is just going to out damage it in most levels until you get to really high ones. So you're kind of picking and choosing between like really good blood loss build-up or really good damage. But either way, when using the Impenetrable Thorn spell, it doesn't matter. Number 2, Staff of the Great Beyond. This is an Intelligence and Faith-based staff, of which this is now the third one in the game. But the cool thing about this one is that it does cast both sorceries and incantations, which is obviously very cool. Might be a bunch of really nice spell combos out there between both the sorceries and incantations. Some might have some really good synergy, and being able to just have it in one staff makes it a lot more convenient. Now, in terms of optimizing your damage, this is obviously not going to be the way. If you want to get the most amount of damage out of both your sorceries and incantations, in almost every single instance, you're just better off just having another staff and another seal. But this one actually can be very good at certain levels. Basically, if you wanted to actually have an Intelligence Faith-based build, this is the best staff to use, up until you reach about 62 Faith and Intelligence, and then you would switch to the Prince of the Death Staff. So yes, this is just going to be outright better than the Gelmir Staff at any level, and better than the Death Staff once you reach 62 in both Intelligence and Faith, which yeah, this is going to be a very high number. So you can use this staff as your primary option up until way later in the game, and then you can switch. But obviously this thing actually can cast incantations as well, so you might as well compare it to the Golden Order Seal, which is your lone Intelligence and Faith-based seal that you have. The Golden Order Seal is just the best seal in the game in terms of just incan scaling. Throughout almost every single level, this one just gets higher than the other seals, and it is just going to out damage the Staff of the Great Beyond too. So if you wanted to get the most amount of damage out of your incantations, you're just always better off using the Golden Order Seal. Doesn't matter what level that it actually is. So once you get to those really high levels, it's just not really worth using the Staff of the Great Beyond, and you're just always better off just using the Death Staff and the Golden Order Seal and just switching back and forth because your damage will just be way higher. And also the Golden Order Seal and the Prince of the Death Staff can boost specific types of sorceries and incantations, whereas this one does not do any of that. But the convenience is nice. Number 1, we have the Dryleaf seal. This is another faith-based seal, and it actually is going to be the best seal in the game between the levels of 27 and 52 faith. Between these levels, this is quite literally the best one to use. It will just straight up outdamage all of the other seals, Now before 27 faith, you would use the finger seal, and after 52 faith, you would use the Godslayer seal up until you get to 69, and then you'd switch to the Erdtree seal, of which that one is just going to get the highest amount of damage from that point all the way up to 99 faith. Now yes, this is just going to be for a faith-based build. The Dragon Communion seal and the Golden Order seal actually can get higher incan scaling depending on your level. The Golden Order seal getting the max amount, but obviously those are for different builds. But the DRYLEAF seal also does boost Miquella's incantations by 15%. Now you'd think it would include things like Light of Miquella, but it doesn't. I'm sure it's a bug. It has to be a bug, right? Like if you're gonna boost Miquella's incantations, this should be one of them. But it's quite literally just not gaining a buff whatsoever. Even if you use the Circlet of Light helmet, which also says it's supposed to boost Miquella's incantations, that doesn't work either. But the spells that it does affect is Multi-Layered Ring of Light, and it actually does boost the Golden Order ring attacks like Discus of Light, Triple Rings of Light, Radagon's Ring of Light. It boosts all these by 15%, which yes, the Golden Order seal also gives it a boost, but that's only 10%. So this is quite literally a bigger boost to those spells. So they've literally just gotten better. And even with the Circlet of Light, that helmet is going to give you a bigger boost to these incantations, more so than the Gold Mask would. And the funny thing is, you actually can put the Golden Order seal in your offhand and potentially use the DRYLEAF seal as a main option when using these Certaintizer incantations, and both of the passive effects are just going to stack, and this is just going to be the best way to just maximize your damage with these specific spells. But yes, outside of those spells, as I mentioned, once you get past 52 faith, it is not going to serve any more of a use. Anyway, that's the video now done. As always, please do like and subscribe. In terms of the next video, I might as well just like bite the bullet and rank the Spirit Ashes. I know plenty of people actually want me to rank the Spirit Ashes, so I'll see if I end up getting that done tomorrow or the day after. And if you do want to see me test them out, go check me out on Twitch. I am live there like almost every day, so do give me a follow. And yeah, catch you guys around. Bye.